This is South Africa, a country that at first glance would seem to have it all. The country has immense mineral wealth, varying landscapes, all four seasons, diverse cosmopolitan cities, and is the only African country that is part of the G20 economies. However, as winter approaches in South Africa, the country's main electricity provider, Eskom, has announced that the country may soon enter stage 8 of load shedding, which would mean that regular citizens would be stuck without power for up to 12 hours a day. So why is one of the most successful African countries on the continent facing such a severe electricity problem? To understand where this issue stems from, we need to go back to the 1960s. During this period, South Africa was going through an economic boom. The South African government was implementing policies to promote industrialization and diversify the economy beyond its traditional reliance on agriculture and mining. The manufacturing sector expanded rapidly with the production of automobiles, machinery, and consumer goods. To support this rapid rate of industrialization, the country needed to meet power demands, so the government invested heavily in power generation, which led to the widespread usage of coal power plants. This was ideal at the time, since coal from South African mines were abundant and readily available for usage, which led South African electricity to being amongst the cheapest in the world. This lasted up until the late 1990s, when analysts from South Africa's largest state-owned electricity company, Eskom, determined that by 2007, the company would run out of electrical power reserves unless immediate action was taken to alleviate pressure off the already aging power stations. And despite multiple warnings and requests from Eskom to increase its capacity, the government ultimately took no action. This was highly problematic since as the economy continued to grow rapidly into the early 2000s, the demand for electricity also increased heavily. Only in 2004 did the South African government allow Eskom to significantly expand and diversify its electricity production, but by that time it was too late. The company was already behind in terms of assuring that future energy needs would be met, and on top of that, the implementation of such projects was often delayed due to cost overruns and issues related to governance and project management. All these issues compiled on one another and eventually led to South Africa's first load shedding period, which lasted from late 2007 to mid-2008. These load shedding periods would go on to repeat themselves 5 times over the span of 14 years. With some lasting only a month and others lasting up to half a year. It's important to note that though Eskom and the South African government are to blame for the current load shedding situation, other factors such as corruption and gang-related activity also contributed in making the load shedding situation as bad as it is. This brings us to today. Regular South Africans of all social classes are subjected to up to 9-hour-long power outages. Businesses are shutting down, exacerbating the already high unemployment rate, and the lack of steady power is affecting all sectors of the South African economy. But the most pressing issue that this energy crisis is creating is social instability. South Africa is on the brink of collapse, and its citizens are tired of the current ANC ruling party neglecting their needs. You see, up until 1994, South Africa was run by an apartheid government, a white government which segregated the black majority from the white minority by forcing black South Africans to live in designated areas, restricting their access to job opportunities, and preventing them from engaging in politics. Once the apartheid regime ended in 1994 after a series of negotiations, the majority black population as well as other racial minorities now held political power, and having been oppressed for decades by the previous white government, the African National Congress, also known as the ANC, was voted into power, with Nelson Mandela being South Africa's first black president. And so for the past 3 decades, the ANC party has remained the dominant party in South African politics. But with the energy crisis only worsening as time goes by, the ANC may for the first time in nearly 30 years be voted out of power. With that being said, however, that doesn't mean that all hope is lost. You see, South Africa is a big country with huge potential for energy generation through alternative means to coal. If South Africa accelerated its switch to renewable energy production, it could potentially have a big enough energy surplus to be able to sell electricity to neighboring markets. I'm no expert, but I was able to determine that it would take around 355 million solar panels covering a surface of 568 square kilometers to be able to meet the entirety of South Africa's electricity demand for 2021. That's roughly the same size as Singapore, which you can see here on top of South Africa. Now, obviously, when South Africa inevitably switches to renewable energies, the country won't only rely on solar energy for its power needs, but through this estimate, we can see the immense potential that renewable energies have for the country and the world as a whole. All in all, only time will tell what South Africa's fate is and whether it will rise to reclaim the glory it once had, or will fall into the category of a failed state. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment with suggestions for future video ideas. I'll be reading and liking all of them.